Fourth meeting of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. And pursuant to Standing Order 1082, study of the mandate of the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. And Mr. Sohi, Minister Sohi, I welcome you. I want to thank you on behalf of the committee to responding so quickly to our invitation. And congratulations on your new role. And we very much will enjoy having an opportunity to talk to you and to ask you many questions on your important portfolio. Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, main estimates of 1617, vote 1, 5, and 10 under the Office of Infrastructure of Canada. Minister, I will turn it over to you if you'd like to introduce your officials that are with you as well today.
I will. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you. I would like to extend my congratulations to you as chair, as well as to Luke Berthold and Linda Duncan on their recent elections as vice chairs. I have been asked to appear today to speak with you by my role in the development of the 10-year infrastructure plan and the delivery of a refocused New Building Canada Fund. I also want to talk about why my department is going to do to support government's commitment to transparency and openness. I'm joined by today my DM, Mr. Tremblay, as well as Associate Deputy Ministers Jasmine Larache and Helen Borges, as well as Assistant Deputy Minister Darlene Boyle. Oh, there was Darlene sitting here, and sorry, I should have pointed to the right people. I will begin by addressing the items on the main estimates. Infrastructure Canada's total authorities for 2016 and 2017 are $3.9 billion. Included in department's main estimate is $2.1 billion through the gas tax fund, which is predictable funding for Canadian municipalities for their infrastructure priorities. There's also $1.6 billion in contribution funding available for provincial and territorial infrastructure projects. The remaining amount identified represents operating funding for Infrastructure Canada to administer and deliver these programs, and capital funding for the acquisition of land for the new Champlain Bridge Corridor project and Gordie Howe International Bridge. Infrastructure Canada's expenditures match the pace at which funding partners build their infrastructure projects and subsequently submit claims for eligible expenses. If recipients do not claim the expenses they forecasted in any given fiscal year, Infrastructure Canada asks Parliament to reprofile program funds through the future year appropriations to meet the cash flow needs of the recipients. As you know, our government has committed to invest $60 billion of new infrastructure over the next 10 years. This funding does not appear in our 2016-17 estimates, but we are working with Mr. Morneau as he develops the budget. Now I will speak about the 10-year infrastructure plan and the refocusing of the New Building Canada Fund. Everyone in this room knows there are significant benefits to infrastructure investments, both in the short term and the long term. Well-planned investments in infrastructure generate economic growth, create jobs, and leave a lasting legacy for Canadians. But infrastructure is so much more than the structures themselves. It's more than concrete and the water pipes, or roads and the bridges, or buses and the train tracks. Infrastructure is really about people. It is what connects Canadians to their communities and allows them to be active participants both socially and economically. Infrastructure is about a parent sleeping in peace knowing that their children will have clean and safe water to drink. It is about a safe haven and a shelter for women fleeing domestic violence, and clean and safe housing for someone who has no other options. It is also about Canadians having decent, well paying jobs that allow them to raise their families and give them the high quality of life. Infrastructure can do that. Infrastructure is the foundation that shapes our communities, making them more livable, sustainable, and providing the places we want to live, work, and play. Our infrastructure investments must be made strategically, collaboratively, and with the long-term vision. They need to focus on projects that are not only shovel-ready, but also shovel-worthy. All orders of government have an equal role to play in building strong communities, and I'm working collaboratively with our government partners and Indigenous communities, as well as our stakeholders and municipal association partners to build the infrastructure this country needs. Collaboration will be key to our success. I have already had extensive discussions with our provincial, territorial, and municipal partners, and have met with mayors from across the country and representatives from Indigenous communities. I have met numerous times with Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I met last month with Big City Mayors Caucus, and I have met with other key stakeholders and associations like the Canadian Urban Transit Association. We are designing our new approach to infrastructure in collaboration with our partners. And by working together, we will provide the long-term, dedicated, and predictable funding that will help build communities for the 21st century. So let me talk about our plan. We have committed to doubling infrastructure investments over the coming decade. This means $60 billion of additional investments over the next 10 years that will focus on three strategic areas: public transit, green infrastructure, and social infrastructure. And in our desire to start supporting communities as quickly as possible, we have also committed to investing $10 billion of that money in the next 2 years. We're also planning changes to the Building Canada Fund to make it more focused on strategic and trade-enabling infrastructure priorities, including roads, bridges, transportation corridors, ports, and border gateways. And we are looking at ways to make the application process more responsive and flexible to allow communities across the country to access funding more easily and rapidly. Moving forward, we are faced with challenges of getting infrastructure investments into our economy quickly, while ensuring we also act in a long-term and strategic way. Our work and investments over the next 2 years must lay the foundation for longer-term infrastructure transformative change. We know that infrastructure across the country is not in state of good repair. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities' recent report card reported that 1/3 of municipal infrastructure is between fair and very poor condition, that at current reinvestment rates, this infrastructure will continue to deteriorate. My consultation with partners reiterated that this critical aspect of infrastructure, recapitalization and repairs, demands attention. And by focusing on the repairing of our existing infrastructure, we can fix what we have now instead of delaying and paying more to fix it later. So as we begin to invest in infrastructure, we also propose to make investments that can enhance municipal planning, asset management, and data collection capacity. This will help all orders of government make evidence-based decisions and put us on a more sustained path. By providing targeted infrastructure investments, social, green, and public transit projects, and refocusing the new Building Canada Fund, we will be able to address the real needs of Canadian communities. Finally, as I mentioned in my introduction, I want to speak about my department's commitment to transparency and openness. My department, along with several others, have posted on our website the table of contents to the briefing binder I received when I was sworn in as minister. Anyone can reach out to the department and request to receive a copy of my briefing materials at no cost. We have posted the signed project agreements for the work being done on the new Champlain Bridge And last month, we posted a breakdown of the funding remaining in the New Building Canada Fund for each province and territory. This provides a clear picture of how much funding we have remaining to accelerate in the coming months and years, as we have committed to do. And I have been posting updates to our website that tells Canadians what I have been doing as Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, the partners I have met with, the meetings I have attended, and the projects that I have visited. As you know, our government has an ambitious plan to build communities that are sustainable and inclusive. By working in partnership with other orders of government and key stakeholders, we can develop and implement an evidence-based, strategic, and collaborative plan, one that will support us as we work to build the communities in which Canadians desire to live. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Minister Sohi. I appreciate your being brief. Still had 2 minutes left, and so that'll give more time for the committee members. Starting with the Conservative side, Ms. Watts for 6 minutes.
Great, thank you very much, and I appreciate you being here and your staff and giving the time to the committee. It gives us a good opportunity to have some good dialogue and flush out some things here. So in terms of, and I first want to thank you. I know you've mentioned the gas tax fund numerous times, so I want to thank you very much for doing that, because it's you know, it's been in place for, I guess, almost a decade, and we've had very good success with it with our government, and of course doubling it and then indexing it to make sure that it would be remaining in perpetuity. So that's been very helpful to communities, and you know, as being a prior mayor, I was a benefit of that as well. I do have a couple of questions in terms of the 10-year infrastructure plan, because I know that's underway now, but when you're saying that there's not any additional monies that will be in the figured into the plan because it's not in the budget. Now, will that be anticipated that it will be in the budget, or and the reason I ask this question, because I know that there was a an announcement of I think it was $10 million over the next 2 years that will go to roadworks, and there was also an announcement by the Prime Minister, another $2 billion over 2 years for projects to reduce carbon pollution, and another $5.4 billion over 4 years for green infrastructure projects. So I'm just wondering now, are these already included in the budget and not part of the additional, because under this stream would be a $20 billion over and above the existing budget?
Well, thank you for that question. What we have committed to do is spend $10 billion of additional money.
Existing money.
The additional money that we committed during the campaign, which is under green infrastructure, social infrastructure, and transit infrastructure. So that $10 billion of additional money will be part of the budget process for approval. This is the new commitment that we made on top of accelerating the existing funding that is available to communities under the Building Canada Fund. As you may recall, in 2014, the previous government allocated $14 billion for under New Building Canada Fund. Very little of that money has actually been spent so far. So we have about $9 billion in one component and $3 billion in other component that is left to be committed. So our goal is to commit that money, with the as the projects come to us from provinces, because it's the provinces' money allocated based on each province. But additional to that is the new commitment of $10 billion for green infrastructure, social infrastructure, and transit infrastructure over the next 2 years, which is part of the budget process.
Right. Okay. And just a bit further on that, because I know that there's been, especially within the Green Fund, and again, that was, thank you for using the Green Fund, because we set that up in 2009. So in terms of the 20 billion for each strand, and there's 10 billion for the next 2 years, how much is going to be allocated within each of those strands?
Our overall commitment over the next 10 years is
No, I mean the 2 years.
over 10 years, let me explain. Over the 10 years is $20 billion for public transit, $20 billion for green infrastructure, and $20 billion for social infrastructure. For the first 2 years, our commitment is to spend $10 billion of that in each categories in the similar amount. So over 2 years, it will be $3.4 billion in each of the 3 categories.
Okay, and then that's over and above the existing.
That is over and above the existing Building Canada Fund.
Existing amount, okay. And I just the P3 screening, I know that's been removed. Will there be additional screening for infrastructure projects added on to that? Because I know it was removed for the process piece to speed things up. Is there additional processes that we're adding on top of that? Or?
What we are doing is streamlining some of the process that exist now in order to flow the resources to communities as quickly as possible and as rapidly as possible. So part of that streamlining is the removal of the P3 screening for any project that was over and above $100 million.
Right.
We believe that as we don't own the infrastructure that we support, it is the communities that own the infrastructures, and we believe that it should be up to the project proponents to decide how they want to procure their projects, whether they want to go P3 or not want to go P3. That decision should be up to them. What we do is see if those projects fit into the federal criteria in the existing funding, and as we develop the new funding for the additional $10 billion, we will be developing a criteria to support the federal outcomes of growing the economy, making our economy more productive and efficient, and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as building inclusive communities.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Ms. Watts, your time is up. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Ballaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here today. It's something that we all look forward to for quite some time. And with that, you currently identified in your comments with respect to transportation and economy, and how important it is that they're both aligned, as was most recently identified within the Emerson report. And you correctly identified a need to make the application process more responsive, to focus on trade-enabling infrastructure, those priorities, of course, as well as including transportation corridors, ports, border gateways. Mr. Minister, the Minister of Transport, as you know, recently tabled in Parliament the report on the Canadian Transportation Act, the review of the report, and of course, or the Act, and with that identified a few recommendations. One of those recommendations includes transportation infrastructure. For example, the report recommends that the federal government develop a comprehensive long-term 20 to 30 years transportation infrastructure plan. So my question through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister is, does the government plan on implementing the recommendation? If so, what are the timelines for developing this plan, and what is Infrastructure Canada's role in its overall implementation?
Well, thank you for that question, and through you, Madam Chair, as you may recall, part of the mandate letter from the Prime Minister is to refocus the existing Building Canada Fund toward more trades-oriented infrastructure. So, in consultation with my colleague, Minister Morneau, we are looking at how we can align some of the infrastructure funding that is available to us towards the outcome of the Transportation Act review. Right, that is currently underway. Minister Garneau can. He'll be able to fill you more on the details of the review, what stage and how much time will it take. But you're absolutely right. In order for us to grow the economy, in order for us to make sure that we have efficient transportation corridors to move our goods and services and enhance our international trade. And the work that we are doing on the Gordie Howe Bridge, the work that we are doing on the new Champlain Bridge, as well as how do we support additional investments into trades corridors, is one of the requirements. Our expectations from the Prime Minister, from my department, is to work with Minister Garneau's department, and we're doing that.
Thank you, Minister, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
Hopefully, being an expeditious process. Now, that's dealing with moving with trade. Now, just moving on now to moving with people.
Yes.
Moving people around, reflecting the government's commitment to invest an additional $60 billion in infrastructure. And with that, the mandate letter identifies public transit, social infrastructure, as well as green infrastructure as key priorities for infrastructure investment. How will these priorities be reflected within the new infrastructure investment plan, and will this focus have an impact on the amount of federal funding available for other types of infrastructure?
First, to your first question, through you, Madam Chair, there will not be any impact on the existing funding. This is additional money on top of what is available for communities now. Public transit is very critical aspect of making our economy more productive and efficient. Anyone who lives in an urban center and know the gridlock that is faced by major cities. So we want to deal with that, and that is why we have decided to invest $20 billion into public transit. But we also will support other communities with their transit needs through Building Canada Fund, and as well as the additional money that is available. Under the social infrastructure, our focus is going to be on housing, both affordable housing, social housing, seniors housing, the shelter for women fleeing domestic violence, early learning facilities, as well culture and recreational facilities. Under the green infrastructure, we want to build communities that are more resilient towards climate change, so dealing with floods, providing support for green technologies, making sure that our indigenous communities have safe drinking water, ending boil water advisories on indigenous communities. So that will be the focus of these new buckets on top of what we already support through existing funding. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. Minister, Ms. Duncan.
Thank you very much, and nice to see you here, Mr. Minister. I congratulate you, and I also extend my condolences to you again on the loss of your father.
Thank you.
And appreciate how dedicated you are. You're continuing to do good work. Some of my questions were asked, but I'd like a little bit more detail. Of course, I confer with your former colleagues, like the Mayor of Edmonton, Mayor Iveson. And I know that the City Council in Edmonton and other jurisdictions are happy to see the backside of P3s, unless they decide themselves that's the route to go. But one of the questions that's being raised by my mayor and other mayors are, for those who were essentially forced to go P3 on projects such as LRT extensions, they only received a quarter of the money from the federal government instead of a third as we received. Are you going to be adjusting that so that we equalize the transfer of funds for those who are forced to go with the P3?
Well, thank you for that question, and through you, Madam Chair. You're absolutely right. One of the reasons that we removed the condition of P3 screening was to allow municipalities to make their own decisions. The other thing that you have identified is that it limited the funding for municipalities at 25% of the total eligible project cost. Under traditional model, municipalities would receive up to 1/3, in some cases up to 50%, depending on the project. But under P3 was limited to 25%. So as we move forward on removing the condition of P3, we will be adjusting that cost sharing formula for major projects that fall under that big project category.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that various mayors would like to hear that it's going to be adjusted for existing approved projects as well, but so be it. One of the recommendations of the Emerson report, the report under the Canadian Transport Act, was for the federal government to give assistance to municipalities who are wanting to relocate rail or deal with rail that is interfering with the safety of cities. And the question I'd like to ask you, I know that of the 3 priorities that the City of Edmonton has identified, and probably a number of at least prairie jurisdictions, they're identifying federal money for that purpose. I'm wondering if you are giving consideration to a separate pot of money, potentially in cooperation with the Department of Transport, and in cooperation with some joint funding from the rail companies to address the safety issues and the backup of traffic and so forth, to relocate these rails or provide overpasses, underpasses.
Well, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is refocusing on the existing Building Canada Fund. There are 3 components to Building Canada Fund. One is for small communities, one is for provincial territorial infrastructure, and one is for national infrastructure. So what we are looking at is having those discussions with Minister Garneau's department. Where do the alignments happen on that, with the focus on the Transportation Act review. The project you're mentioning, I'm well aware of those projects. They're, I'm from Edmonton, and I have one of the things that I should mention is that I have wonderful people who are working with me in this department, who are constantly in touch with all mayors throughout the country, as well as provincial and territorial counterparts, to understand what their needs are and how do those needs fit into our priorities. And we are working together with the provinces and municipalities to ensure that we are there to support them to build the necessary infrastructure they need to build, whether it's rail separations or grade separations or any other sort of infrastructure.
I'm not sure I got a clear yes or no, but I'll pursue it later with you. The third quick question that I will have is on northern infrastructure. And of course, in Alberta, we often think that we're in partnership with Northwest Territories. There's a lot of toing and froing backwards. I'm interested to hear that the $20 billion green infrastructure, a lot of that is for northern or isolated communities. I'm aware the Northwest Territories have decided that they're going to shift from having dirty, expensive diesel to try to switch to renewable power. I wonder if you could tell me what exactly you're thinking will be included in the green infrastructure. How much of that is under you? How much is under the Department of Natural Resources? And are those the kind of projects that you might be financing?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And through you, Madam Chair, green infrastructure, as I said earlier, will focus on water, wastewater, on clean technologies, as well as flood mitigation. I have met with the Northern Caucus, and I'm open to meeting with any of the MPs that want to reach out to my department to share their concerns, whether from North or not. So, and we have heard those concerns related to how do they transition from diesel to more electrical systems for their infrastructure there. So I can't give you the exact answer at this time because we're still developing the criteria for the new money for the $10 billion over the next 2 years. But as we progress on that, I will hopefully be able to come back and update you on that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mr. Minister. Is it true that you used to drive a bus?
Yes, I did.
See, there's a friend in transit in the room, that's for sure, and that's great to see. It was also great to see, by the way, you attend a news conference in Surrey a few weeks ago now to announce some 53 projects across British Columbia, all in the interest of state of good repair. Not exactly the spectacular ribbon-cutting opportunities when done, but certainly foundational initiatives that'll definitely help those communities. And I know that state of good repair will be the focus for the first couple of years, but my community in Surrey is absolutely eager, as is all of Metro Vancouver, in fact, to see rapid transit expand. And I guess the simple question is, where is that on the horizon?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. As I stated in my remarks, 1/3 of a municipal infrastructure is in either, I would say basically in poor condition. So we need to invest in refurbishment, into modernize existing infrastructure, and also optimize the existing infrastructure in order to get a better use out of it. But that does not mean that we will not support new projects. I have been very clear with my conversations with provinces and municipalities that yes, our focus will be on the repairs for the first 2 years. But if a municipality has done a good job of investing and maintaining their existing set of infrastructure, they should be able to use that money for new projects. So this is not about doing one at the cost of the other. It all depends on the local municipality's priorities. In the case of your community, if they want to focus that on building new infrastructure, we will work with them. If they want to focus on designing or doing preliminary work for building of new infrastructure, we will work with them. If they want to put their money towards repairing the existing infrastructure, we will work with them. We believe that local communities know better what their needs are, and we are here to work with them to support those needs.
Through the chair, Mr. Minister, how do you balance respecting the direction that municipalities wish to go and leaving the decision making to them in terms of the projects that go forward? How do you balance that with your need as a minister to produce infrastructure projects that contribute to the economic foundation of the country that will actually help us improve our economy, not only internally but international trade as well?
Well, what I have learned so far in my conversations with various partners is that there's so much common between what local governments think, what provinces think, and what we as a federal government would like to achieve. It's just about tapping into that common interest and common outcomes and working toward those. In the three categories where we have new funding that will become available, our outcomes are very clear. We want to focus on public transit to reduce gridlock. We want to focus on social infrastructure to build sustainable, inclusive communities. On the green infrastructure is about climate change and building resilient communities. So any project that ties into those three broadly defined outcomes will be supported, as well as under the existing Building Canada Fund, the roadway projects, as well as trades corridors. I hope that answers your question.
Do I still have?
You have 2 minutes
Oh,
remaining.
excellent. Then I have another 2-minute question. The Emerson report that was referenced by my colleague a little earlier did talk about moving rail lines away from existing built-up areas, and we have one specifically in South Surrey through White Rock, the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, which follows the coastline, which is subject to more and more these days impacts of climate change, erosion and rock falls, everything else. Would the green infrastructure funding available to help communities be more resilient to climate change, would that be possibly a source, along with others, of funding that could get that rail line relocated?
I'm going to ask my DM to talk about some of the interconnection and the collaboration that my department and transportation is doing, because we also shared the DMs until a few days ago, right? So, right? But we haven't defined the criteria on green infrastructure yet. DM, you want to?
On the CTA review on the report includes 60 recommendations, as you know. It's also a report that includes a lot of big thought in terms of, and that's actually the breadth of this report is actually quite exceptional. So it's too early to know exactly what would be the response to the report. So the Minister Garneau would be consulting and would be working on what would be the response, the government's response to the report over the next month. And those issues of what to do with this recommendation, as well as the 59 other recommendations, recommendations will be considered in that context. I think it's too early to know, to be honest.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fraser?
Thank you very much, Minister, for being here. I really do appreciate that you've taken the time. I'm from a place that's consists of small towns and rural communities. I think when we think infrastructure, the tendency at the federal level is to focus on big cities. I know through the sort of meetings with the big city mayors that has been a focus. Are there any plans that you or the department has to ensure that small towns and rural communities aren't left behind and that their infrastructure needs are met?
Well, thank you for that question, and through you, Madam Chair, you're absolutely right. We will not do one at the cost of the other. Overall, $60 billion that we have committed to invest over the 10 years, you will see small communities, mid-sized communities, and larger urban centers receive their fair share of the funding, right? We also learned in our conversations with our partners that cookie-cutter approach does not work. We need to have a flexibility built into our system to design our system to meet the varied needs of each community, whether they're smaller communities or mid-size or larger. Urban centers have need for public transit, but smaller communities may have need for water facilities. They may have need for a recreational center. They may have need for some sort of other needs that fall into the social infrastructure or green infrastructure. So we will design our plan in a way that it reflects the diversity of our country, and also it reflects and nimble enough to meet the needs of all communities regardless of their size.
Certainly, following up on a comment about public transit, in my own home riding, I know a modest investment in public transit would be transformational. The lack of access to public transit has had a disproportionate impact on people living in poverty, on seniors, on persons with disabilities. Although this is typically reserved for the bigger cities, is public transit for smaller communities that can't necessarily afford their traditional one-third contribution going to still be on the radar?
We had very extensive discussions, ongoing discussions with mayors from across the country, as well as Federation of Canadian Municipalities, along with many things that we have heard from them, is the municipalities' capacity to match their share of the one-third funding that has been traditionally required by the federal government. We are listening to them very carefully. We acknowledge the challenges that they face. As we develop our new plan for the new money, we will be looking at different options. I don't know what that option is going to be at this time, but I also want to make it clear that for the existing funding, under the Building Canada Fund, which is kind of midway through its implementation, we cannot change that funding formula, because some communities have already received their share at one-third. So if we change that midstream, it creates complications for our relationship with provinces and municipalities. But for the new money, we are looking at a different set of requirements or different set of arrangement, how much federal government should contribute toward municipal infrastructure.
Thank you. I'd like to shift gears a bit. I'm approached frequently by NGOs or community organizations in my riding who have a specific infrastructure need that would greatly benefit my own community. Do you have any advice as to how these groups could best access any infrastructure funds? Is it going through the province? Is it partnering with the municipality? Is it reaching out through me to your office directly?
The process that exists now is that each community will prioritize their own projects through their own internal processes and bring that forward we'll bring that over to the province, and province will bring that forward to us. So that is the process that exists now, right? As far as the new money, we don't know what process or which mechanism we're going to develop. But for the existing money that is available, if a community has a project that they want us to look at, they need to go through the local community and then through the local to the province before it comes to us.
And when you say community, can I assume you mean municipal government?
It depends on, right, and sometimes if municipality is a funding partner, right, then they promote and advocate that project. In most cases, in my experience, municipalities are partners in those community-based infrastructure.
Sure. I will just put on your radar then that in my experience, there are certain communities that fall within a larger municipality, but because they don't form part of the population center, they sometimes feel ignored. So in your deliberations, I ask that you keep those communities in mind. Do I still have any time, Madam Chair?
Half a minute.
Sure. Quick question then. On green infrastructure, you mentioned flood mitigation as a priority. Will there also be room for severe weather protections? Just I live in an area that has lots of fishing communities, and oftentimes fishermen won't fish out of certain harbors due to choppy waters. So would something like a breakwater that protects against severe weather be possible under the green infrastructure?
Well, thank you for sharing that. We will take that into consideration as we develop our plan.
Thank you very much. Mr. Berthold, 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Je vais laisser le temps.
Madam Chair, would like to greet the Minister. Thank you, Minister. It is a pleasure to have you here and with your team. We have met some of the people from your office last week or the week today. I would like to continue in the same vein as my colleague concerning small communities. But when we talked about supplementary budgets, we were looking at the Champlain Bridge and ending the toll. We heard that $4 billion would have to be found. Will this money be found from the new money, within the new money that the government has put into its infrastructure plan, or will it come from existing departmental budgets?
Through you, Madam Chair, I want to assure this committee that no infrastructure dollars from the existing funding or from the new funding is allocated or thought to be allocated to for the Champlain Bridge. Champlain Bridge is already, the cost of the project is already built into the fiscal framework. The tolling revenue would not have gone to pay for the bridge. It would have gone into the general revenue of the government, right? And the reason that we made a commitment to remove the toll from the Champlain Bridge is because it is a replacement bridge. It's not a new bridge. And it was done without any consultation with local communities, the local mayors, local business community, local the communities that are impacted by the toll were not consulted in the design of the toll, and we're going to live up to that commitment to remove the toll from the Champlain Bridge. But there will not be any impact of that on the infrastructure dollars that are available to communities, whether they're existing dollars, whether they're new $60 billion, because everything related to into the cost of the Champlain Bridge has been already built into the fiscal framework.
Donc, si je comprends bien.
If I clearly understand, I have a little trouble seeing how we can do away with $4 billion without there being any impact, but the government will commit to providing the same amount of money as before.
As I said earlier, the complete cost of building the Champlain Bridge has been already budgeted into the fiscal framework. The tolling revenue was not designed to use that to pay for the cost of the bridge. The tolling revenue was designed to go to the general revenue of the government. So there's no linkage in that way, right? And there's no linkage of taking money away from my department's resources to compensate for the lost revenue of the tolling. But I can ask Helena to further maybe add a little bit more to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Comme on a dit la semaine passée, il y a 2 semaines,
As we said last week or 2 weeks ago, the amount provided for the new budget is already in the fiscal, for the new bridge is already in the fiscal framework, and there is no more money required for that. That money has already been approved. So we'll ask another committee about the foregone income. But the second point, you've talked about the existing Building Canada Fund. I'm familiar with Quebec because I was the mayor of a municipality, and I know how much this Building Canada Fund can help the small communities to carry out big projects. However, it would seem that it's difficult to get the money out. And where are the discussions to ensure that Quebec municipalities can finally have access to these amounts?
You're absolutely right. The province of Quebec was allocated almost $176 million under the small communities component of the existing Building Canada Fund. But unfortunately, none of that money has been actually invested into any of the committees in any of the communities in the province of Quebec, and that is the case with other provinces too. That is why we are looking at what were the barriers in the existing program that took the ability away from the provinces to actually get that money in a timely manner. So we are looking at streamlining our processes, and we're looking at removing some of those barriers that provinces like Quebec get their fair share of the money from the existing Building Canada Fund, both in the small communities as well as for the provincial territorial component. Because this is the one thing that when I took over this department, one thing that I learned was that what are the reasons that communities are not getting the support they need, and we're looking at streamlining and removing some of the barriers that exist so communities can get the money they need.
Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. Secan, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. I know you're aware of the Missing Link project. We've also talked about it. And in light of today's discussion, I'm just trying to plot where it would be on the funding spectrum. Would a project like that fall within the other types of infrastructure in this additional $60 billion?
Where this would fall in is what has happened so far, that I had met with the mayors from the region, as well as both transportation minister and my counterpart in the province of Ontario, to understand the need of this project. This is a very high priority for area municipalities as well as for the province. So we were working with them to assist. There has to be some preliminary work done around it before we look at where the funding is going to come from, because there are a lot of work has to be done to facilitate some of the partners to bring them to the table, whether it is CPCN or other stakeholders. So that's where we are. We are using federal government's facilitative role in order to bring those partners together. Unfortunately, I had to miss the meeting because I had to go attend my father's funeral. But maybe DM can update you on the meeting that had happened between transportation and some of the other stakeholders.
It's a very good question, and it's a bit premature to know. We're going to have to see the development of the project. Some suggest that it could be included in public transit, and some see it more as a transportation corridor, if you want, which would be beyond the public transit. I think we will need more and more discussion to see the detail of the projects before assuming which envelopes actually can take it. And we'll see when the project will be further developed, how it would fit inside those different envelopes. One thing is sure, as Minister said, is we've been engaging with Ontario over the last few months on this one, and that's clearly one that we want to look at into the detail. But it's, as you know, it's a big one, a very complex one, And I think we're going to have also to understand what are the first steps. There's the work with the railways, there's environmental assessment that will have to happen and all this. So I think we'll have to further dig in terms of the projects before knowing exactly what could be the envelope and also what could be the time frame.
Okay. Thank you. Just my second question here is, so what changes will the Infrastructure Canada implement that are intended to improve the transparency and speed of the approval process for existing infrastructure projects?
Well, one of the things, and through you, Madam Chair, one of the things that I mentioned is the removal of the P3 screening. That will streamline some of the processes. The few other things we are looking at is when the announcements are made and how the announcements are made and how do they tie into the readiness of the communities to take on actually deliver on those projects. Other things we are looking at, that we need to design we want to make some changes that will actually reflect the needs of each province. What works for Ontario doesn't work for Saskatchewan. What works for Saskatchewan doesn't work for British Columbia, right? So we can't have one approach fit all situations. So those are the things we are exploring. Hopefully by the time I come back next time to this committee, I'll be able to give you more concrete examples of what we are doing, because we are having those consultations at various departmental level in order to. But our goal is to make sure that it should not take as much time it takes now to get projects approved. Right? Once they're approved, we should be actually flowing money to the communities as quickly as possible. Right? And how we do that, that is something we are discussing. Yeah.
Thank you, Minister, for the answers. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the Minister for being here today and making the time available, and I pass on my condolences on the loss of your father. Local governments typically know their local needs the best, but it sounds like these decisions are going to need to pass multiple levels of approvals, first at the municipal, now the provincial, and now your level. Is that correct? Or maybe you can explain a little further.
And through you, Madam Chair, the way the current process works is that local communities prioritize what their project is, and they go through their approval process. Then goes to the province, then comes to us, right? We require additional information, right? Sometimes it's appropriate information that we need. Sometimes it's a duplicate information that we ask for. So that is what we are looking at when we talk about streamlining. Where do we can reduce some of these things where actually that are unnecessary. We don't hold projects if they're complete, if they're ready to go, and if the funding is in place and the criteria is met, right? My goal is to, we will be developing some performance measurements and standards very soon in order to measure our performance against those standards, right? So we want to get the projects approved and as quickly as possible, keeping in mind that we want to make sure that our objectives are met, that we are putting money toward where money should go. The project should be a worthy project. It should not be just a project that comes to us regardless of the what outcome will it achieve, right? So, but you're right, though, there are, in some cases, there are multiple layers of screening, sometimes unnecessary. So we are looking at how we can streamline some of those things. Yeah.
Thank you. Another word that I've picked up on, kind of a word change from as the budget speak came out, was that the focus seems to be away from transportation to transit. And as a rural MP, and I've spoken with other rural MPs, we're just concerned. We want to be sure that some of the transit or transportation needs in other areas of the province outside of our urban centers is of equal focus. We have some transportation corridors that we have been improving upon, but still continue to need improvement because of cost of building those. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you're going to look at those projects as well?
Well, thank you for that, and through you, Madam Chair. The new money, the $60 billion, is allocated for 3 strategic outcomes: public transit, green infrastructure, and social infrastructure, right? But the existing money that is available, which is about $13 billion, there's resources available in that funding envelope for transportation projects, including roadway projects. And we are looking at the list that we get from the provinces. They prioritize. They have the ability to do so, right? If province determines that they need to put that money towards building a bridge, they can do that. If they feel that that money needs to go toward building their transit system, they have the ability to do so. So we don't determine where their money goes. It's money allocated to the provinces, and they determine what their priorities. So there's about, I would say, $13 billion available that can go toward transportation infrastructure that based on the needs of the local communities.
Let me just clarify, that's of existing
That
money,
is that is the existing Building Canada fund that is available now, that was initiated in 2014.
Okay, if I can continue then, the new funding, that is all going to transit, not transportation?
The $20 billion over 10 years, it is going to transit. But what also, if you look at Prime Minister's mandate letter, right, it also asked me to refocus the existing Building Canada fund toward transportation and trades corridors. So having $20 billion available for public transit in the new money makes the existing money available for other transportation needs. Because what would have happened if the new money was not available? Then all that $13 billion, different players would have been fighting for that part of money for different needs, whether public transit needs, whether roadway needs, drainage needs, or recreational facility needs. So what actually would end up happening is that the additional $60 billion will reduce pressure on the existing $13 billion that we can refocus toward supporting more transportation infrastructure.
Ms. Duncan for 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Happy to see that you are proposing a national housing strategy, which our party has long called for and FCM has called for, and I'm sure you were part of that, Minister. It would be my understanding that your ministry would take the lead on the national housing strategy regardless of whether a good part of it would include affordable housing, which, as your staff have been trying to explain to me, is under Mr. Duclos. Of course, it also affects Aboriginal communities and northern communities. So I've wondered if you could tell me whether you are moving forward on your national housing strategy, who you're going to engage in that, what will include, and how much of that are you going to lead?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's a shared responsibility between my department and Mr. Duclos' department. His department is taking the lead in engaging the stakeholders for the design of the national housing strategy. I'm there to support his initiatives. We can provide you more information on that, what stage they are at this time. But it's Mr. Duclos' area that is taking the lead on developing that long-term strategy, as well as there are different components to it. They're included in the mandate letter, whether it's supporting co-ops, whether it's restoring the subsidies that were lost or that will basically be transitioned if they're not restored. So it's his department that is taking the lead.
I would appreciate, Mr. Minister, some kind of follow-up information explaining that, because when I look at 1/3 of your $20 billion for housing, seniors, shelters, so forth, I presume that would include cooperatives, and as you're aware, there are 8 cooperatives in my riding.
Yeah.
They're very concerned that the agreement on supporting those is disappearing.
Yeah.
And so even though your mandate letter says that you will work on the national housing strategy, we need to be speaking to a different minister?
We will get back to you on that, right? Because I can't give you the answer, but it's a shared responsibility. One thing that Prime Minister expects from all of us as ministers is to work collaboratively and together with each ministry to fulfill the mandate that Canadians have given us. Housing is one of them, and developing a national strategy around housing is a high priority for our government. I think it's a priority for all Canadians, I would say, because you've been advocating for that for a long time, right? And I appreciate that, and FCM has been doing that. So we will get back to you on where we are on that, and update you as we proceed. Yeah.
For 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I just want to sort of understand a bit of the process, because I know when the Build Canada Fund came into being, the consultation process included a steering committee of 33 infrastructure experts, 200 partners, 12 ministerial roundtables, 18 written submission, and the Canadian Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And so that consultation process was undertaken. The federal government supported more than 43,000 projects across Canada, 688 green infrastructure, 33 public transit, and the communities component now under the Build Canada Fund, over 900 projects were approved, 590 are completed, 410 of those are in process, and we were ranked second among the G7 countries for public infrastructure investments. So, and in keeping, and I know that it's important to keep, the whole program going and moving forward. And so I'm glad to see that there's some significant alignments, like I said, as I go back to our green infrastructure program, which was wastewater infrastructure, green energy, and I see that under the mandate letter too, that those coincide, and some of these things are getting built upon. So, is it the intent to redo all of the consultation process with all of the work that's been done, or build on the successes that we've already had?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think some of the references you're making is related to the old Building Canada Fund. There are too many Building Canada funds. One has been designed in 2008 and 9, then there was another in 2014, right? So this sometimes public gets confused, right, which one we are talking about, right? But to your question, what we want to do for the existing Building Canada Fund, which is the new Building Canada Fund started in 2014, is look at where some of the challenges were. We're not going to, go back and overdo the whole program. Right? It's not going to serve us, it doesn't serve communities. What we want to do is look at where some of the challenges were and remove those challenges. Yeah. One of them in P3, the other one you identified are different layers of analysis that has to be done for projects. The other one was how do the rural communities access that.
And one of the biggest actual issues that I think has been long-standing, even back then, has been the conflict between the priorities of provincial government, the priorities of cities, and the priorities of the federal government. So I'd like to understand how you're going to square that one.
Well, thank you for that. And you served as a mayor for many years, and if you have any ideas that you can share with me, right, I would.
I think we should take the middleman out and just go, yeah.
Right.
That would be the problem.
I would love to hear from you on those. But you have identified a problem that we would have to solve, right? Yeah. I don't know what the solution is going to be. One thing that I have been working hard to do is build a stronger relationship with all players, all partners, yep. Municipal partners, and our provincial territorial partners. Right. So the more we can bring them together on the same table to talk about these issues, maybe there's a way for us to streamline and get no,
Yeah.
we can't get the middleman out because that's the, it is,
Good luck.
it is
Good luck with
constitutional,
that.
right? I think there's a desire.
Right.
There's
So
a desire
my last
to work
question
together.
before I run out of time. What's the national tolling policy? What's your national tolling policy? Because it seems, depending on which province you're in, it's different. So I'm just curious.
Go ahead.
We have a tolling policy for the federal government, for the federal assets, but each jurisdiction does its own tolling policy, as you're suggesting, because the roads, most of the roads are owned by provincial governments, not the federal government. Most of our assets tend to be bridges, and we have tolls on pretty well all of our international bridges. We don't have tolls on our domestic bridges, which are the bridges in Montreal primarily.
Right. Will you be looking at an overall road pricing strategy
That's more
in conjunction with provincial government?
Yeah, that would have to be in conjunction with provinces. It's
Yeah.
more in their responsibility, but it's an interesting idea.
Is that a yes or a no?
No, it's not a yes. I mean,
I'm trying.
first of all, I'm not going to abolish provinces, and secondly, I would respect their
What's that?
areas. I would respect their areas of jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But it is, as you know, there's some municipalities who start talking about this issue of.
Well, because when you look at the cost of infrastructure, I mean, not only within the jurisdiction of the provinces and right across Canada, I mean, the maintenance, the upkeep for everybody is significant. So the road pricing makes it fair and equitable for everyone, as opposed to, Ken and I, you and I have had this conversation like for years. And it would seem to me that, that would be a way to generate, and it's best practice all over the world, except for in some provinces in Canada. But
All right,
I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Watts. Mr. Iacono, for 6 minutes.
La Présidente, j'aimerais saluer et remercier le ministre.
I would like to thank the minister and his team for being with us today. My question deals with the Champlain Bridge. In accordance with your mandate letter, the new Champlain Bridge will be toll-free, which will involve changes to the agreement for the project. Furthermore, the federal government will have to compensate for the loss of revenue and pay for the other costs. My question: for the next 35 years, will the government eliminate toll on the Confederation Bridge between New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island, and which is also a part of the federal administration?
Here, we have committed to removing the tolling infrastructure that would have been built on the Champlain Bridge. We made that. We have communicated that to our private consortium, the partners who are building that piece of infrastructure, and we are in the middle of negotiations in order to achieve that. As far as removing the tolling on the Confederation Bridge, right? It is it's a new bridge. I understand it wasn't a replacement bridge, and I think the federal policy calls for having tolling revenue, a toll charged on a new piece of infrastructure, not a replacement piece of infrastructure. I think that's the distinction between the Champlain Bridge and the other bridge, or Gordie Howe Bridge, for example, because that is also a new piece of infrastructure.
Justement, c'était ça ma deuxième question.
That was going to be my second question. What would the federal government's intention be with respect to tolling on the Gordie Howe Bridge between Windsor and Detroit? It would be the same?
The toll will be charged on the Windsor. I'm sorry, on the Gordie Howe crossing from Detroit to Windsor to Detroit. It's a very, very needed project that we need to build. Almost $100 billion of trade crosses that crossing each year. If we want to grow our trade, we need to build that bridge, and it's so critical that we continue to move forward on that. But it will be a cost recovery, and the tolling will be a revenue that will be generated by the users of the bridge that will compensate some of the cost for the bridge. But so there will be a toll on it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ms. Duncan?
Thank you. I have a very quick question, and that is about the 50%, which I think one of the colleagues already raised the question. So through you, Madam Chair, Federation of Canadian Municipalities wanted the portion from the federal government to be increased to 50%. Now, of course, we have a number of jurisdictions, including the jurisdiction of Alberta and others that depend on resource revenue, who are struggling and probably can't provide the 1/3. I think somebody asked that question, and certainly my mayor of my city has raised that, is whether the federal government will move to increase to 50% per project and to cover full capital costs.
Through you, Madam Chair, as I said earlier, we have heard from municipalities across the nation that their capacity to match 1/3 of the funding required for any project is very limited. As you know, as many of the people who have been part of the municipal councils or pay attention to municipal needs, they collect about 10 cents of every tax dollar that we Canadians pay in taxes. So we understand that limitation and their capacity to match funding. But what that additional support be from the federal government? We want to design that in consultation with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. We want to do that in consultation with the cities as well as provinces, because we can provide additional support, but there's also more resources required from the other end too, right? For example, provinces still need to contribute, right? Even though municipal portion may go down, right? But provinces still need to be on the table. So we want to design again the approach that I am taking is not a top-heavy approach where I impose solutions. I think that will fail. What we need to do is work with them and see what is the appropriate level of support from the federal government, and then do that in consultation and in collaboration with them.
If I have 2 more seconds. I read very closely the Emerson report, and some of it, of course, crosses over into your portfolio, Mr. Minister. I was particularly interested in the section on the north, and there seems to be 2 conflicting interests there and conflicting recommendations. One is saying we should hear from the people of the north, including the Indigenous communities, on what the priority should be for infrastructure dollars. And an opposing one says what we should do is prioritize some nation-building projects. I'm wondering where you're going to fall in the middle of that, and I'm wondering where some of these, and my colleague spoke about smaller communities, of course that's what they are in Canada's north. How will we make sure that they get their fair share of the pie, and also because they've got critical issues dealing with climate mitigation and so forth?
Well, thank you for that, and through you, Madam Chair, I will comment on the capacity issue, and I'll ask DM to talk more about the Emerson report. We have heard from our territorial partners, and also having conversation with some of my colleagues from northern communities, and again, this ties into the existing Building Canada Fund, and we are looking at some options, how we work the small communities component and the provincial territorial component, and we combine them possibly together, right? Because every community in North is small community, right? And having a provincial program that has different set of requirements, and having a small communities program that has a different set of requirements doesn't make sense, right? So we are having some conversation with them on how we can actually improve that and bring maybe 2 programs together. Another thing that we do for the North is federal contribution almost 75%, right? For all projects. So territories contribute 25%, because again, recognizing. Another is the design capacity of northern communities. Doing some of the planning work, which is sometimes difficult for them to do. So we're listening to them, and we're working with them to have that flexibility where I talked earlier, don't want to repeat again, that cookie cutter approach is not something that is helping our diverse communities.
You have 1 minute left, Ms. Duncan.
You want to touch base on the Emerson?
Quick one, and maybe your deputy can answer that, is the question of when is north north? And I noticed also in that report they recognize that some of northern Ontario, Quebec, and the Prairie provinces, maybe even BC, are isolated Aboriginal communities. We've got problems with ice roads and so forth. So I'm just wondering if you're looking at those together.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Most of the time when we say the North, we talked about the territories because of the special relationship we do have with them, as you know, from constitutional perspective and historical perspective. But there's the issue of remote communities that would apply to the north of Quebec, the north, of course, Newfoundland, Labrador, and would apply, of course, north of Manitoba, for example. On your questions on the Emerson report, I'm not sure it's actually a contradiction. I think what the report is saying is you need to hear the needs of the community, but if you want to answer their needs, you're going to need national projects in some cases. For example, if you do transportation corridor, how do they benefit to the small communities and the communities there? If the increased traffic and maritime traffic happen in the north, as some suggest, what would be the consequence of this on the development of the small communities? And one thing that he mentioned is also about passengers in the north and the cost for transportation. So he kind of admitted that giving the small communities and the size of the communities, it needs a national kind of support in that aspect.
Thank you very much. Mr. Badaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And once again, I appreciate the questions and the comments. As a mayor for the past 14 years, I'm sure some of my colleagues have been for quite some time as well. We recognize the needs, and quite frankly, again, congratulations on being very consistent with those needs. You're listening, and not only to the FCM and to some extent the provincial organizations, but from your comments and your answers, obviously you're hearing a lot from the mayors, big and small communities, and again, consistent with what they're saying in terms of your comments, and focusing, and this is what we hear a lot of at the municipal level, is focusing on infrastructure investments becoming enablers, becoming economic enablers, not only with respect to economic development, but also with respect to sustainability within our communities, both within asset management, lifespan, repair, maintenance, and of course, eventually, inevitably, replacement. And as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Minister, with respect to transportation, for example, transportation corridors, investing in those areas, ports, and of course border regions, border gateways, you once again correctly identified in your comments and answers additional investments that lends itself to the economic sustainability. So with that, Mr. Minister, the 2016 and 2017 main estimates proposed a 5% decrease in the planned spending by the Jacques Cartier and Champlain bridges, as was mentioned earlier, and incorporated related to a reduction in the project scope for repairs and ice control structure at the Bonaventure Expressway. In what manner did the project scope for repairs of the ice control structure and the Bonaventure Expressway decrease?
Well, I'll get my my staff to comment on some of the technical and the detailed financial aspect of your question, but I'd want to make one point that the way the funding flows for projects is different for capital projects than they are for operational projects. Because capital projects are they take over multiple years to finish, right? So money might be allocated in 1 year, but it may not be spent that year. It may be taken over to the next year, right? Transferred over to the next year, then it's get reprofiled in the next year. So there's that way some of the numbers don't match in that sense, even though the overall project cost is the same, the amount of money being spent is the same, but how much money gets spent in year 1 or year 2, year 3, year 4 differs from year to year depending on when the bills come in, right, from our partners. But I'll ask any of the staff members to comment on some of the detailed numbers in the estimates.
In fact, it's exactly what the minister is saying. The scope of the project hasn't changed. It's when the money is actually being utilized that it's being reprofiled to a forward year. Often in these big projects, just the weather gets in the way, and unfortunately, during periods of time in the year, you can't do the work that you plan to do, so they have to be deferred to the following year. Thank you.
And with that, in the same vein, in the 2016 Canadian Infrastructure Report card, 62% of large municipalities, 56% of medium-sized municipalities, and 35% of smaller municipalities reported having formalized asset management plans more towards the capital side, as well as, I'm sure, during that time frame, lifespan, as well as looking at replacement. Those plans including bridges, roads, all the way down to water, sewer, CSO programs, again, both capital and operational. To what extent will Infrastructure Canada's work on enhancing municipal capacity in asset management take into account these different and existing asset management capacities? Question number one. And question number two, what are some practical ways in which those requirements for formalized asset management plans can be imposed recipients of federal infrastructure funding?
Well, thank you for that question, and through you, Madam Chair. I want to acknowledge the work that FCM has done on doing this report and identifying the gap in the repairs that has to be done in the existing infrastructure, but also identifying the lack of capacity on part of municipalities to do the asset management or proper planning and having proper data to analyze all that information, right? Some municipalities have done a good job, some have not, right? And it's these kind of investments that get reduced when times are tough, right? So what we want to do is look at what role federal government can play where municipalities can rely on us to have that support, where they can actually dedicate the resources to do the kind of analysis that is necessary to understand the state of the infrastructure they have. And as MP Watts has mentioned earlier, right, the maintenance of the infrastructure, optimization of the infrastructure, and how do we actually pay for that infrastructure? All those things needs to kind of, they need to grapple with those questions in order to build long-term sustainable plans. And we want to assist them to do so by providing some sort of dedicated support, probably, right, that will enable them to draw from the federal capacity to do that kind of analysis. If we don't do that, I fundamentally believe in this, and our department has done quite a bit of back and forth discussions, and they understand we need to understand what the state of our repairs or what the state of infrastructure is in each community. Otherwise, we will never be able to deal with the big deficit that we have in infrastructure. We don't even know how big that deficit is. Different reports tell you different things. So we need to have the better data. We need to build the capacity of communities, and hopefully through this budget process, through the discussions, we will be able to show some support to municipalities in order to do so.
Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. Hardy.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I, like many of the members, spent some time at home last week, and I was very pleased to have a, a visit from our local YMCA. I was surprised to find out that as an organization, they probably are the #1 provider of childcare across Canada. We have wonderful facilities and really good staff. And as my colleague from South Surrey White Rock indicated, through others, everybody's looking for a direct pipeline into the federal government to make their appeal for some very worthy projects. Understandably, of course, we have to follow protocol, but I'm asking actually for some advice. What can I say to the folks from the YMCA? What kind of mechanism would they follow, or could I follow as their representative to make sure that their voice is heard when it comes time to allocate funding for things like childcare?
Okay. Well, one of the things that we have been done, and we have met with various stakeholders from the housing sector. And I understand that Mr. Duclos' area is also engaging the non-profit sector in to seek their input into the design of not only the housing strategy but also the long-term, the early learning childhood, the early learning care strategy. But I can take that back. Thank you for that suggestion, because this is something we have to grapple with, right? If we want to support a local community infrastructure, how do we engage with non-profit sector that provides the kind of the facilities and services that you're talking about that align with what we want to do as a federal government under the social infrastructure, whether it's housing, whether it's child care facilities. So I'll take that back with to Minister Duclos and convey it to him. And I'm pretty sure he's doing that already, right? But we will take that back to him on that, on your suggestion.
Well, thank you, Minister.
Yeah.
A further question, and this may again be a far more difficult one. We obviously want to accomplish things with this heavy investment, and I asked you a little bit earlier about, ways that we could see these investments produce results that help build the economy, etc. When the Prime Minister spoke in Edmonton almost a year ago at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, he wasn't Prime Minister yet, but he was working on it, he said something that you didn't have to have a picture of the mayors, but to see them nod when he talked about predictable funding. But predictable funding can extend not just beyond, the municipalities as they go through their procurement. It extends, the benefits extend to the people they do business with. So, for instance, in my former life in Metro Vancouver's Transportation Authority, we were often sensitive of all of a sudden an influx of orders that we would place to Nova Bus or to New Flyer or to a shipyard to build, a new C-bus. And one of the things that could come from predictable funding is also predictable orders. And I'm just wondering if there's been some discussions that would see that kind of ripple effect go through to our manufacturing sector.
We haven't done that kind of analysis yet, but you raise a very valuable point that that long-term, sustainable, predictable funding not only assists municipalities in order to plan for the long term, but also execute those plans for the long term, because it gives them predictability. But it also ties to the economy as well, right? If we can, if our businesses know that in a certain community, investment into public transit will be done over a number of years, over 10-year plan, then they can definitely build that capacity to bid on those projects, because they know that work will be available for 10 years. Same thing with social housing, same thing with the water, wastewater, drainage work. So you're absolutely right, but we can definitely do some analysis on that, how it actually sustains the economic growth, not helps us live with the downturn as well, right? So
we don't get the dolphin effect. And one final quick question: what is the state of P3s in the country? We removed that screen, but do we have a lot of capital sitting there waiting to participate in that manner?
DM, you can touch base on that, but we can get back to you. That I understand there's about a few $100 million left in the P3 Canada fund. It was a $2 billion program over a number of years, but vast majority of the money has been already allocated. But one thing I want to assure each and every one of you that our removal of the P3 condition is not impacting any of the projects that are underway or that have been signed, because again, it's the local community's decision, right? If there's no additional requirements on municipalities to do this, and there's no impact whatsoever on the existing projects or on the future projects, right? There's a few $100 million left in the P3, and P3 Canada still exists. That corporation still exists, and municipalities can still apply to that corporation for funding.
Thank you very much. Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Dernière question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a last question about the tolling on the Champlain Bridge. there are still negotiations concerning for the removal of the tolls, and I understand that the $4 billion is building costs for the next 4 years. What is still to be negotiated?
Dans l'accord avec le secteur privé,
in our conversations with the private sector, there's an infrastructure that had to be built, the electronic system for the toll system. Since we're going to eliminate the tolls, we will be removing these things from the contract. So it would be a little bit cheaper, or the construction will be a little bit cheaper. So there could be an amount of a penalty, or there could be something that will be paid, something to compensate the groups. That is what is being negotiated at the moment. Do you have any idea of the amounts of money that might be involved? No, not yet. During the project planning, they have included certain things, or have perhaps incurred certain expenses. So this is what we are looking at now. Thank you. Now I have the whole picture. Thank you. Mr. Minister, Mr. Fraser was speaking a while ago about small communities which are worried because the three priorities of the plan, our priorities, seem to be urban priorities. When we spoke with some of my former colleagues in Quebec, former mayors, we were afraid of perhaps being forgotten in this major infrastructure project, this vast infrastructure project. And I just want to let you know that people are very impatient, specifically since you've said small communities in Quebec haven't received anything yet. So there's a great fear, and I think it would be very a good thing if you could reassure them about the federal participation in this project. And under the new plan, I have studies from Quebec municipalities which show that the participation of municipalities in infrastructure projects represents in all of these perhaps 70% of the costs. These are costs which are assumed by the municipalities. The municipalities are the only level of government which have no return on their investments. They cannot collect taxes from the workers. So their participation is really 100%. You know, you were municipal council. There's no return on investment for municipalities. They hope, I think, that there will be a pause from the federal government in the next plan. I know you've gone ahead, but since you have to plan quickly budgets if you want the municipalities to be ready, could you tell us perhaps what level of participation do you expect from small municipalities under the new plan?
Make in consultation with the FCM and other partners onto the funding requirement, matching funding requirement, from whatever we change from 1/3 to whatever the new level be, will benefit all communities. Big communities, small communities, and mid-size, small. Every community will be benefit from that. The other thing I want to make it clear is that under the three new streams of funding, social, green infrastructure, and transit infrastructure, small communities will be able to, there are needs of small communities that are not being currently met for water, wastewater, flood mitigation, and other things that they need to do. So they'll be able to access funding from green infrastructure. They'll be able to access funding from social infrastructure, and they'll be able to continue to access funding from Building Canada Fund, right? And there we're also making some changes to allow them more flexibility to access more funding from the Building Canada Fund. So what I can assure you that moving forward for the design of the new money, we will provide support to all communities regardless of their size. We will treat all communities fairly regardless of their size, and we will provide them funding based on their local needs. on the priorities that they have identified.
J'ai encore un peu de temps, oui. Je comprends, tantôt, vous avez parlé dans...
We'll have a few minutes. A few minutes ago, you were saying that under the new plan, that you're going to try to eliminate useless steps, and I know that sometimes having to deal with the provinces would seem like an unnecessary step for us, but you are going to have a challenge to increase the payments to the small communities, and I think colleagues here, the people who represent the small communities, are going to work very hard to ensure that this happens. A great deal has been done by small communities. A lot of money has been invested, and the small municipalities' capacity to pay is decreasing. They are increasingly getting into debt under the last fund, particularly in Quebec. Municipalities participated in financing your new plan will make possible, will oblige the municipalities.
Yeah, thank you for that, and through you, Madam Chair. One of the things that part of my mandate letter is the creation of the infrastructure bank. The role of the bank would be, that's what I envision, is that how do we support municipal infrastructure where municipalities don't have the capacity to borrow, or if they borrow at a higher rate, right? What role federal government can provide to give them low-cost loans or loan guarantees over a number of years so they can do their matching in cases where they don't have the capacity to match.
Yes. Thank you, Minister. Mr. Secan.
So we're currently living in an era of drones. There's an app for everything. And I noticed that in your mandate letter that you were tasked to assist the Minister of Public Safety. And I was just wondering what the government currently has and will have in place to protect critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question, because it is part of the mandate, and my staff had some initial discussions with Minister Goodale's staff on this, because we want to make sure that we, as this review is being done, that we put in place mechanism to protect our infrastructure from cyber threats, right? Maybe DM, you want to touch base a little bit more on where we are in those.
Minister Goodale would be better placed to tell you what are the measures that are in place. Our role would be to support him, and I know that Minister Goodale is thinking about consultation on cyber threat in the next month. For us, what would be important is more what is the critical infrastructure, and especially in the projects that we fund, what are the critical infrastructure? Can we identify them, and how can we make sure that the proponents, the people who owns those infrastructure, knows about the risk, and working with public safety would be essential to do that.
I don't have a follow-up. Thank you.
And just for the benefit of the members, you can, when you have your 6 minutes or 5, you can share it with one of your other colleagues if you choose. If Mr. Fraser, did you want to share some of Mr. Secan's
Sure,
time?
I'm happy to jump in, and I don't think I need the full 6 minutes. Just following up on the line of questioning on the infrastructure bank, I think this is a really unique idea that could benefit small communities. Is there any sort of guidelines that you can provide that will help small communities as to what kinds of projects that they might get low-cost financing for through the infrastructure bank?
At this time, I cannot say which projects will qualify or not, right? We are at a very, very preliminary stage in working with Minister Morneau's office on this, because this is a shared responsibility of my department and Minister Morneau's finance department. But the idea or the principle behind is this: to provide, first of all, recognize the capacity issues of municipalities, then create something where they can tap into the resource they can tap into to access those those loans, or if there are any other issues that we identify in consultation with them, because there will be a lot of consultation for the design of the infrastructure bank. We will engage private sector, we will engage municipalities, we will engage definitely, we'll seek input from you if you have any ideas into that. So I can't give you which project. What the principle is that we have recognized the capacity issues, and we want to tackle that capacity issue through the creation of the infrastructure bank.
Sure. You mentioned consultations with the private sector. Is it possible that the infrastructure bank would actually potentially provide financing to private enterprise, or is it restricted to municipalities?
I can't comment on that at this time because we don't know what the scope of the infrastructure bank is going to be.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that my understanding met yours and potentially the mandate letter. Shifting gears briefly, if I have just another moment or two.
2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm a member of the Status of Women Committee as well, and one of the needs I know at home for me is increased women's transition shelters, which I know is part of your shared responsibility with the Minister for Status of Women. What efforts have you made to collaborate with the Minister for the Status of Women to accomplish this end?
Thank you for that question, and through you, Madam Chair. We consulted with the vast majority of members of Parliament, with my cabinet colleagues for the design of for the new money. And one of the areas that Mr. Haiju has identified is investment into transitional homes, right? Shelters as well as transitional homes where there's long-term support available for women fleeing domestic violence or anyone fleeing domestic violence. The cost to the economy of not investing into that area is huge. It's about $7 billion that our economy loses each year because we don't have enough places for women to go to. Just imagine the hardship on them. Just imagine the hardship on their families, loss of their potential, and loss of the economic potential, the way they can contribute to build the kind of communities that we all desire to live in, right? So it is about helping those individuals, but it's also building a society that we can all take pride in. And it ties to the economic success of our society. So I am really passionate about it. So is Minister Haiju and many of the other people on the table. We need to invest in this infrastructure in order to provide the proper support that women fleeing domestic violence and the children fleeing domestic violence need. So we are working very closely with her department in that, and our Mr. Duclos department on that, because this is a shared responsibility and included from the Prime Minister in the mandate letter.
Thank you very much, Minister. Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask the Minister if there must have been some criteria around the decision to move the expenditures of the Champlain Bridge basically into a general expense now rather than recover it through tolls. I'm just wondering if the same criteria would apply to an infrastructure project, say in Western Canada, the Trans-Canada Highway that moves goods from all of Canada to our western shores and our people back and forth. Would the same type of criteria apply there? And would the funding flow on an equal level with that corridor being, in some opinions, far more important?
Well, let me make this absolutely clear that it was not my decision or this government's decision to flow the tolling revenue from Champlain Bridge into the general revenue. That decision was made when this project was procured, right? So it was designed, the whole procurement process was designed in a way that all the cost to build the bridge, to maintain the bridge, to pay for the interest cost to the private sector were built into the capital budget, into the fiscal framework. And it was decision made at that time that all the tolling revenue will go into the general revenue, not be tied into the Champlain Bridge. So it wasn't a decision that this government made in order to wear where those resources could go. On any particular project that you have in Western Canada that is similar to that, please bring that to our attention. I'll be able to give you more informed answer on that. I can't just speculate on hypotheticals, right? But if you have a particular project that you have in mind, right, please share that with us, and we will provide you more information related to that particular project. Where does that fit into the tolling? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll share the rest of my time with Ms. Watts.
Great, thank you very much. Just two questions. We know that the federal wastewater regulations had changed, and a lot of regional authorities and some cities have to upgrade their systems. And so I'm wondering if there is, because they'll need $3.4 billion to meet one of the targets and an additional $14.6 for the full compliance. So is there going to be a special fund set up to meet those federal requirements for cities and regions?
It is my understanding that municipalities would have to comply with federal regulations by 2020, right?
Yes.
Or 2021, right?
But there's a huge cost implication.
And one of the reasons that we designed the Green Infrastructure Fund is to assist municipalities to invest into water, wastewater infrastructure. So the $20 billion over the next 10 years, they will qualify for funding under that funding envelope in order them to assist to upgrade their water, wastewater facilities.
Right. So I guess my question was, because the Green Infrastructure Fund was set up like way back in 2009 that had wastewater infrastructure that was under that.
This is different.
So I mean, that's what I mean. Is it different, and will you be adding additional dollars for the compliance of these regulations?
Yeah, the whole $20 billion in green infrastructure.
Yeah.
Part of that is to build the capacity of the municipalities to comply with federal regulations.
Okay,
yeah.
Perfect. And then just one other quick one, just in terms of the domestic violence that you were just talking about. Now, would those dollars flow from the federal government to the provincial government? Then it becomes, because it's under the mandate and jurisdiction of the provincial government to build transition housing, shelter, all of those things. And I know, and I'm sure many mayors around here, the struggle in terms of getting those facilities built into a community. Would you specifically earmark those dollars for that specific mandate?
We are at a very early stage on the allocation of the funding, how much should go for each of the categories that qualify for funding under the social infrastructure, which is $20 billion over 10 years. But this is a need that has been identified, and we are keenly aware of that need.
Yeah, it's been a need for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
But the challenge always has been getting the dollars out of the provincial government to make sure that those facilities are built and those measures are undertaken.
And you're absolutely, because some of these shelters and transitional homes are provided by non-profit sector, right? And some are provided by municipalities, some are provided by provinces, right? So
operationally, not capitally.
I'm talking about capital dollars, right?
Okay.
Because we don't support operational.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
Time is up again. Ms. Duncan?
Yes, I have a follow-up question, an interesting one, that relates to when we're building infrastructure that crosses international borders. And it relates to, now I understand the Windsor, Detroit is now called Gordie Howe. Am I right about that? Okay. I'm from the West. I understand the East. And I'm told that there were some problems in building the access way, the Herb Gray Parkway, that they had to reinstall some of the work because it wasn't based on Canadian construction code standards. So concerns that are being raised to me is the Government of Canada going to make sure that for the aspects of going forward with the bridge are going to be compliant with Canadian code? Their second question is, are we going to face delays? Are we still in negotiations for the purchase of the lands on the U.S. side?
It's more of a technical question that I'm going to refer to my assistant DM or associate dean, sorry.
Okay, no problem. To answer your question about complying with the Canadian Bridge Code, yes, the project on the Canadian side will comply with the Canadian Bridge Code. The part of the project on the U.S. side will, of course, comply with the Bridge Code in the U.S. They're very similar, so there's not a big discrepancy. What you're referring to on the Parkway was that it did comply. It's just that the steel that was used on the concrete that was produced was not compliant with what Ontario had requested, but it did comply with the code.
And I understand that's a P3 project. Is the government going to intervene and make sure we don't run into those problems again on safety?
Yes.
We've had a few problems with bridges in my city, which I won't dwell on, Mr. Minister.
Yes.
So we want to make sure that it's the top quality work.
It's all being recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to name any particular bridges. I do want to go back to the green infrastructure. And my question would be this. Why is it that we only have allocated 1/3 of the money for green infrastructure? Why are we not applying that kind of criteria for all of the work that the federal government is going to fund? Whether it's energy efficient housing, whether it's, I mean, I'm happy to see you got a separate fund about transit, which is of course totally green. But I'm wondering what kind of screening you're going to be providing for all the other funding that your government's going to be allocating.
What I can do at this time is talk about the high-level goals that we want to achieve through these investments. One of them is to grow the economy, make our economy more productive and efficient. The other goal we want to achieve is environmental sustainability and the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And the third goal is to build inclusive communities, right? So everything needs to come together. Investments that we will make into public transit not only will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but they will also deal with building inclusive communities by providing people access to public transit where they can go work, meet with their friends, access recreational facilities. It's a social mobility aspect of public transit.
Yeah, that's, your time is up.
Yeah.
Ms.
And the
Duncan.
second is social, which is ties into green as well. Retrofits, for example. Retrofits is one of them. Energy efficient retrofits, yeah.
Now we have a few minutes left. Is there anyone else that still has questions that they would like to have? We got everybody all over again. Then we will. Well, it's very rare, Minister, that we have a minister for 2 hours, and you've been very interesting comments.
Consentement unanime, on peut continuer plus longtemps aussi.
We will continue for another 7 minutes.
Okay.
So we're back to Chair
Madame
Sack.
Watts.
Go ahead, Ms. Watts.
Thank you. And I just wanted to just to go back to the issue around specifically earmarking funds for federal priorities. So back to the challenge of aligning everybody in terms of the because many things that you are talking about are things that cities would determine unto themselves in terms of how they want to shape a city, how they build community, all of the engagement pieces, all of those things. So is there a plan to take the municipal strategies and plans, overlay it with the provincial plans, overlay that with the federal plans, and come up with a master plan on some of these issues?
You know, that's an excellent question, because we are grappling with that too, as we are looking at streamlining some of the existing money, Building Canada, as well as how we design the new plan, where we want to find where the alignments are between province, municipality, and us. But we're going to leave the prioritization of the projects to local communities. We won't tell communities which projects they should build, right?
Right.
What we will do is look for, as I said earlier, what the outcomes that we want to achieve. Those
For
outcomes
sure.
tied to the three areas that
Right. So in our area, Ken, you'll attest to this as well. The Massey Bridge, that is a #1 priority for the provincial government. For every mayor in the region, it's not. They want public transit. They want a transit system that will, will be robust. So you're at an absolute impasse right there. So, and these are not little projects. They're billions and billions of dollars. So I come back to how you're going to look at squaring that, because you're either going to have to, and that's why when we did the gas fund, it went directly to municipalities so they could get going on their priorities. So, and typically the other dollars have gone through the province. So that's the mechanism that's got to change. So I don't know how you're going to do that, so I'll throw that back at you.
You have identified a challenge that we have to we would have to overcome. Like how do all these three orders of government, their priorities align with each other, right? So again,
Constructive tension.
Constructive tension with DM says, right? So yeah, but that's why I think the one of the things that I have been able to convey to all of my partners and stakeholders is that we want to have very open lines of communication, right? Let's sit down and on the same table, talk to each other, see how we can work these things out. Some will be able to solve, some we won't be able to solve, right? So it's going to be that ongoing collaboration and spirit of working together. In some cases, we will be able to achieve results. We'll see how we proceed on this. But this is a tension that you have identified, and we are, and you know that, right?
Thank you, Minister. We have time for one more 3-minute round. Mr. Badaway.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and once again, thank you, Mr. Minister. And Diane, I have to say, a lot of your questions are bang on in terms of some of those challenges that we're going to have. But with that, I just want to drill a bit deeper on a question that I asked earlier, my first question, with respect to developing a comprehensive long-term 20 to 30-year transportation infrastructure plan that's been identified within the Emerson Report, the Transportation Act Review. And what I mean by drilling a bit deeper is that it does recommend a 20 to 30-year transportation infrastructure plan. And Mr. Minister, in your opinion, does that consider or give consideration to the establishment of a national transportation strategy?
Well,
there's a short answer, by the way, and there's a long answer.
The thing is that I can't give you the answer is because this is the area of responsibility of Mr. Garneau, right? Mm-hmm. And Minister Garneau is engaging with all the relevant stakeholders and partners that he has to engage with in order to come with recommendations out of the review, right? So out of respect for his area of responsibility, I can't give you a precise answer. What I can tell you is that in my conversations with business leaders, I met with the Vancouver Board of Trade. I had a meeting in Toronto, their Board of Trade in Surrey. Transportation infrastructure is identified as a need, and we need to have a long-term plan, right? And so I will work with the Minister Garneau's area in order to assist him in the design of the long-term plan. How is that going to look like? How long is going to be? That will be determined by his area in consultation with stakeholders, and hopefully we'll be able to assist him through some alignment of our infrastructure dollars with his project.
Great, thank you, Minister. And I think it goes to Ms. Watt's question with respect to being credible and accountable moving forward with different strategies, and having those, in this case, transportation strategies, also establishing it as being an economic enabler. I think the Emerson Report was very clear in its preface comments by stating that both economy as well as the investments that come through transportation do add to the overall economic situation, and of course as an enabler to the country's ability to move forward with economic development, as well as taking into consideration a lot of those investments. So although I didn't get an answer, I'm hoping that as we see with all G7 countries, all of which, by the way, have a transportation strategy in place, except for us, I would expect that we fulfill that mandate and, of course, add as an economic enabler to the overall ability for different regions, especially those strategic areas, to have the ability to take advantage of a strategy, and therefore ultimately investments that come out of your ministry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badaway. And Minister, it's rare that we get a minister that comes and gives us 2 hours of your time. We very much appreciate that.
Glad to do so. I'm happy to do so.
I would like to suggest that I think you learned a lot from the committee. They're very engaged members. I think the municipal background is going to abide all of us as committee members very well. So if you'd like to come back and ask the committee some more information and some guidance and suggestions, I think today was a two-way street. Yeah. I thank you so much for supplying us with so much information and in your staff. And please, you're welcome anytime to come to our committee. We will vote when we complete the study on the mains on Wednesday. So we won't be voting on the infrastructure portion today. We'll wait until we're finished on Wednesday, the study. All right, thank you all very much. I move adjournment. Thank you. Lots of time. Told you, I'll give you a lot.